Ladies and gentlemen, it is now indeed my proud privilege to invite Admiral R K Dhowan, PVSM, AVSM, YSM, ADC, Chief of the Naval Staff. May I please invite him and request him to kindly deliver the inaugural address.
It is indeed a distinct honor and a proud privilege for me to be present here today for the joint seminar organized by FICCI and the Indian Navy on Make in India paradigm and roadmap for a future Indian Navy. I would like to say that this seminar is being held at a very opportune moment when the entire country is giving the impetus to the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Make in India, Skill India, Digital India, Startup and Stand Up India. And I'm sure that the deliberations and discussions during the seminar will bring out some very tangible suggestions and chart the way ahead to have a resurgent Indian Navy in all aspects of Make in India, whether it's the aviation sector, shipbuilding, submarine building, and indeed come up with innovative and indigenization ventures which will lead us to the Indian Navy of the next century. The earliest recorded warship building in India can be taken back to nearly 5,000 years ago during the Indus Valley civilization, which existed in the western part of this country in 3,300 BC. Even today, we have a dry dock at Lothal in Gujarat, which dates back to 2200 BC. And it is from these small ports that seafarers sailed out in ships built in India to distant lands like Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and east coast of Africa. On the east coast of India, the seafaring nations of the Kalingas, the Cholas, and the southern Indian empires of the Cheras and the Pandyas also sailed out in ships built in India to distant lands in Southeast Asia. And even today, we can see glimpses of India's cultural and maritime heritage in these countries. During the British period, we had a glorious period of shipbuilding and warship building because the British found the unique combination of the Malabar teak of the west coast of India and the skills of the shipbuilders of Gujarat and started building ships at Bombay Docks, which is the location of the naval dockyard at Mumbai today. The Treaty of Nanking, ceding Hong Kong to the British, was signed on board HMS Cornwallis, a ship built in Bombay Docks. The national anthem of United States of America, the Star-Spangled Banner, was written by Francis Key in Baltimore on board a ship, HMS Minden. And that ship, HMS Minden, ladies and gentlemen, was built in India. The oldest warship afloat in the world today, HMS Trincomalee, which is afloat in Hartlepool in UK, was built nearly 200 years ago in 1817 in Bombay Docks and was also a ship made in India. With this glorious shipbuilding era that we had, regrettably, when the transition took place from sail to steam and wood to steel, we got left behind because India was not part of the Industrial Revolution. But soon after independence, the Navy was quick off the mark. And our first perspective plan paper for a self-reliant and indigenous Navy was written in 1948, just 1 year after independence. With an eye on ship construction, we inducted naval architects into the Navy in 1953. We partnered with the DRDO in the early 50s, and two of the DRDO laboratories were actually located within naval premises at the Naval Dockyard at Mumbai and at Kochi. Our first indigenous warship, INS Ajay, was built at Garden Reach in 1961. We set up our own Naval Design Directorate in 1964. So it's been an aspect related to the vision of the people who headed the Navy at that point in time. And that is the reason why over the last 50 years, our naval designers have designed and our shipyards have built ships in India. Nearly 300 warships have been built of all shapes and sizes in our Indian shipyards. Today, we have made the transformation, as was brought out by Mr. Amitabh Kant, from a buyer's navy to a builder's navy, and more importantly, to a designer's navy. And I'm sure that it makes everybody here proud to learn that all our 46 ships and submarines under construction are being built in Indian shipyards, both public and private. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is only scratching the surface, because the Maritime Capability Perspective Plan of the Indian Navy up to the year 2027, all our ships and submarines are intended to be built in India. And there is a whole amount of scope for the public and the private sector to ensure that we get in the cutting edge of technology and make sure that ships and submarines built in India are among the best in the world. We also have given focus to the aspect related to indigenization in the aviation section, because currently the Indian Navy has 224 aircraft and helicopters, and the naval aviation is on the threshold of a transformation, because future aircraft and helicopters will be made in India in collaboration. And that's a huge range of opportunity for the public and private sector to ensure that the technologies in the aviation sector are also the best in the world. We've also had the aspect related to analyzing the extent of indigenization in our ships and submarines. As you're all aware, warships can be broadly divided into three major components: the float, the move, and the fight component. In the float component, which comprises the structures of the ship, we have achieved nearly 90% indigenization. This is because warship-grade steel has been developed by DRDO and has been manufactured in country. It would make every Indian very proud to learn that our first aircraft carrier, Vikrant, under construction at Kochi, is being built with Indian steel. In the move component, which comprises the propulsion machinery, the auxiliary machinery, we have achieved about 60% indigenization. But there is a huge, huge opportunity for indigenization and partnering with the public and the private sector, because the main gas turbines are yet to be built in India, and I think this is a huge opportunity, both for the main propulsion as well as the auxiliary propulsion and the generators. As far as the fight component is concerned, this comprises weapons and sensors, and I think this is the focus of our attention. While we have made the medium-range guns, the close-range and anti-aircraft guns, the torpedo launchers, the rocket launchers, communication systems, electronic warfare systems, combat management systems are all being made in India today, yet there is a huge, huge opportunity, because this is the aspect of cutting edge of technology that Mr. Amitabh Kant talked about. And this can only come when we get the best in the world. And we would like the best in the world to partner with the Indian industry so that future aspects related to weapons and sensors are also made within the country. We have the aspect related to the Indian Ocean itself, which has emerged as the world's center of gravity in the maritime domain today. There are huge challenges in the maritime domain, and the Indian Navy needs to be a multi-dimensional network force which is combat ready to take on any challenges. As a maritime nation, we have vast maritime interests. And these maritime interests, whether it's the trade, of which, as you heard, 90% flows by sea, whether it's our shipbuilding industry, whether it's our shipyards, whether it's our ports and harbors, whether it's the fishing sector, whether it's our coastline, the EEZ, or our island territories, all are important, because these maritime interests have a vital relationship with the nation's economic growth. And it is the responsibility of the Indian Navy to ensure that these are protected at all times. It has been clearly understood and brought out that there is a need for Make in India. There have been great initiatives which have been taken in the recent past to consolidate. The Navy has outlined its science and technology roadmap for the next 15 years and shared it and discussed this with the DRDO. We have clearly outlined nearly 100 technologies which over the next 15 years need to be absorbed into our ships and submarines. We have also outlined our indigenization plan for the Indian Navy for the next 15 years and shared it with the industry. In the DPP 16, we have a category which has been given the topmost priority, which is of indigenously designed, developed, and manufactured category. And I think with all these initiatives, including R&D, which the Indian Navy supports for the MSMEs, there is an opportunity where we need to partner together. And during the course of this seminar, we need to come up with the answers as to why Make in India is important, and we all agree that it needs to be implemented. How is this to be achieved? Who is to take the initiative? And by when is this initiative to be taken? I would therefore request all those who are chairing various sessions to please make sure that we get some very concrete and tangible recommendations as to how this transition and transformation of Make in India is to be made in the maritime sector, which includes aspects related to aviation, to building of ships and submarines. The environment which has been created in the country by the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister, it is evident that India is turning to the seas once again. And I think we are on a steady course to emerge as a resurgent maritime nation. We can ensure that future warships and submarines can be 100% made in India. Thank you, and Jai Hind.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, and I request him to kindly deliver the keynote address.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Let me at the outset compliment Admiral Dhowan and the Indian Navy for collaborating with a business organization to drive the initiative of manufacturing and making in India and building a self-reliant Navy. This, to my mind, is a unique endeavor. The key challenge for India is to grow rapidly. And India has been growing at about 7.5% per annum. It is an oasis of growth in the midst of a very barren economic landscape across the world. But the challenge for India is to grow at rapid rates of 9 to 10% per annum for 3 decades or more, year after year, to be able to lift a very vast segment of our population above the poverty line. Now, growing at 9 to 10% for 3 decades can only happen if manufacturing in India grows at rates of 14 to 15% per annum, year after year. In fact, no country in the world post-World War II, whether it was Japan, whether it was Korea, whether it was China, none of these countries have grown without manufacturing growing at rapid rates. No country has grown on the back of services sector for a very long time. And there are huge perils of a premature deindustrialization process in India. And therefore, manufacturing is the key. And manufacturing alone can create vast number of jobs for a very young population. And if manufacturing has to grow at those rates, then the defense manufacturing has to be the key driver of India's growth. Without defense manufacturing taking the lead, India can never grow at those rates. And to my mind, defense manufacturing has to be the center of innovation, has to be the center of creativity, has to be the center of India's growth. And I'm really delighted that the Indian Navy has for years been taking the lead in this front. I was very happy when the Indian Navy and Admiral Dhowan, under his leadership, had collaborated with the Make in India initiative in Mumbai. It very vigorously participated in the Make in India week in Mumbai, and actually all the manufacturers from across the world, Prime Minister of Sweden, the Prime Minister of Sweden, of Finland, and the Deputy Prime Minister of Poland could see the huge strength of the Indian Navy. They could see the indigenization initiatives and the innovations undertaken, especially in shipbuilding. The Indian Navy's Design Directorate had set up a stall in Make in India, and this really stood out as a great example of indigenization. And as Admiral Dhowan in the movie said, that the Indian Navy has truly transformed itself from a buyer's navy to a builder's navy in the last 5 decades. And today there are 46 warships and submarines which are being made in India. Now, it's important that if Indian Navy and the Indian defense manufacturing has to grow at these rapid pace, then we need to make radical restructuring in our own processes. And I think one of the first few things which the government of India did when this new government came to power was that it opened up defense manufacturing in a very big way. It opened up the FDI regime and said that foreign manufacturers can come in and bring in FDI up to 49%, but in cases of state-of-the-art and modernization, they can go right up to 100%. So it opened up the FDI regime for foreign manufacturers. It took almost 60% of the items outside the licensing regime and said that you can go ahead and do manufacturing in India without a license. And actually, in the last almost 15, 16 months, we've cleared over about 125 defense licenses. There's not a single license pending in DIPP right now. So every single license was cleared. And therefore, we've given a huge impetus to manufacturing. We took several other measures for giving a huge impetus to defense manufacturing, but one of the key principles of all this was that private manufacturing in India will be treated on par with public sector manufacturing, and that there will be no undue advantage given to Indian public sector units and to the ordnance units, etc., vis-a-vis the private sector. The private sector must have an absolutely balanced playing field to compete and win contracts in India. Now, the challenge in all this is that in India, sometimes we get over-obsessed with our methodology of the lowest cost. If you look at great manufacturing nations across the world, I mean, the basic issue with defense is that it's a monopsony. There's only one buyer. And since you do a lot of innovation, the amortization costs are very high. And therefore, if you look at a country like United States of America, which went in, it really treated its private companies like the national champions. So Lockheed became a champion, many other companies became champions, and actually the defense ministry there put very strong cost audit account systems in the companies itself. And therefore, based on cost accounts sitting in the private companies, the private companies became the true drivers of growth. And all the innovations that have come, including self-driving cars, including internet that have emerged from defense manufacturing in the United States of America. In fact, America became the most innovative society of the world simply because defense manufacturing went into the private sector. And therefore, to my mind, if India is to become a great innovative society, if India is to drive growth, if India is to drive change, if India is to drive its startup movement, all this must happen from the private sector involvement in the defense manufacturing sector. That, to my mind, is the key. And India needs to encourage the private sector in defense manufacturing in a very, very big way. And I really, truly appreciate that the Indian Navy, out of all the three armed forces, has been in the forefront of this and driving this. And there's a lot of lesson from what Indian Navy has done for the other armed forces of India to replicate. So, it's, to my mind, we need to just keep opening up, work in partnership with the private sector. And I think a lot of measures that have been recently taken in terms of the new DPP, in terms of the new offset policy, really try and push these boundaries further to ensure that private sector plays a very critical and very significant role in India's growth and development of manufacturing. So, ladies and gentlemen, India has really got a coastline of over 7,200 kilometers, and this has been the arena of maritime activity relating to trade and commerce since time immemorial. In the current milieu, we as a nation not only need to secure our borders, we need to secure our economic interests within our territorial water. And this, to my mind, requires a very modern, state-of-the-art naval force with latest platforms like ships, submarines, frigates, along with supporting infrastructures like port and evacuation infrastructure. Just last week, we had a maritime meet in Mumbai, and one of the key challenges which the Prime Minister has given all of us is to drive infrastructure development around ports through the Sagamala project so that new ports come up, new connectivity come up, India becomes a great exporting nation, and the whole thrust today is on port-led development. But for a nation which has registered one of the highest growths, as I said, about 7.5% right now, in an era of a very sluggish world economic order, our aspiration is really to become a regional superpower, provide a balance to a new world order. It's very important that we become a manufacturing nation and not just be an importer of defense hardware. And therefore, it is imperative that, like any other great nation with such aspiration, we focus on self-realization and indigenization. As I said, the Navy has been far more proactive than any other industry and really pushed for vendor development and created Tier 2 and Tier 3 industries. Its efforts towards indigenization have started many years back, from design of small boats and vessels to a situation where all the ships currently under construction are designed in India. And as Admiral said, 46 warships and submarines are being made in India, and they actually account for worth over 1,34,761 crores are being executed in Indian shipyards over the next decades. And this, to my mind, is a huge phenomenal achievement. The government of India has really, in the last 2 years, tried to push forward the indigenization through the new DPP. It has pushed the limits. But what will enable us to succeed in our strategy of able to get the best technology for Navy? I think that is really the challenge. And this technology, if we are able to our ability to get best technology can only happen if we are able to get the best private sector from around the world to manufacture within this country. This will ensure that there are out-of-box ideas. We continue to have basic and applied research, which should then become the building block of a future blue water naval force. I have no doubt in my mind that defense and aerospace will be the harbinger of the Make in India campaign, which will give a huge impetus to manufacturing. We need to create that ecosystem. We are working towards this. A vast number of measures have been taken. And based on today's discussions, based on today's interaction, because today we are discussing a vast range of areas, from missiles and gun systems for a future-ready naval force, to propulsion and power generation, to torpedo and directed energy weapons, to surveillance and detection system, to futuristic trends, a whole range of areas: submarine technologies, naval aviation futures, coastal surveillance, autonomous vehicles for naval application, and the future of defense shipbuilding in India. Vast range of areas are being discussed in today's meeting, and we'd like a vast range of new ideas, new thought processes to be evolved, and we would be very happy to take them forward into the decision-making process as far as Government of India is concerned. So the new paradigm is all about partnerships. It's all about partnership between OEMs. It's about partnership between industry, between private sector, public sector, between government and industry. And more critical is the collaboration between industry and academia, and between startups that are mushrooming with young and innovative minds in India. And this is what we need to work towards. How do we provide a further impetus to all this partnership? While movement up the technology curve will be the ultimate objective, it will need to be supported by an ecosystem of far greater liberal budgets, skill sets, infrastructure, flexibility of movements from lab to shop, and vice versa. The Indian Navy, the naval industry, private and public, and the OEMs, the players in this game, all have to collaborate to evolve win-win strategies by complementing each other's strength and help build its ecosystem that will set the rules for a new paradigm for a futuristic naval force. I would merely like to conclude by saying that the key for us is our ability to work with trust of the private sector. It's very important that we use this opportunity to ensure that we are able to provide a level playing field for the private sector. In the long run, India must grow on the back of private sector. It'll be very difficult for India to get the best technology, to be able to constantly grow, evolve, and become a great manufacturing nation only on the back of public sector. No country in the world has done this. India's entrepreneurship is top class. India's ability to absorb technology is top class. India's ability to be a great frugal engineering nation is absolutely top class. We've demonstrated this time and again, whether it was in our Mangalyaan or ISRO, whether it was in our automobile compact car manufacturing, whether it was in auto component parts. All this, India has demonstrated its ability. India has demonstrated its ability in defense manufacturing in the naval sector. And therefore, we need to give a far greater push with the involvement of private sector, both from India and abroad, as long as they continue to manufacture in India. They continue to bring new technology. They continue to create jobs in India. With these few words, I'll again take this opportunity of complimenting Admiral Dhowan and the Indian Navy for this unique initiative today. Congratulations to FICCI, congratulations to Indian Navy. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.